Why you'd regret getting sick in the 1500s. Tonight's tale is not for the faint of heart nor weak of stomach. Settle into your cushioned chair, a luxury your ancestors could scarcely imagine, as we journey back to a time when medicine was indistinguishable from torture, and your odds of survival rested largely on how quickly you could say your prayers. Like and subscribe if you've ever had a headache and immediately diagnosed yourself with the plague. How adorable tonight, dear viewer! You will fall asleep to the gentle lullaby of your own good fortune. For you were born in an era of antibiotics, anesthesia, and reasonably clean hospital sheets. An era where taking your medicine doesn't involve swallowing powdered mummy or having a priest exercise your pancreas. Close your eyes. Feel your soft, clean bedding. Smell the absence of open sewage. And listen closely as I tell you exactly why you'd regret getting sick in the 1500s. Part 1. The Awakening. You wake with a start, your body drenched in sweat. Your muscles ache as though you've spent yesterday hauling the Lord's harvest, though you know you did no such thing. The straw beneath your body feels particularly sharp this morning, jabbing through your thin wool shift like tiny daggers. Something is wrong. Your mouth tastes of copper. Your head pounds like the village blacksmith has taken up residence inside your skull. And the roosters, God's most annoying creation, seem determined to pierce what remains of your sanity with their relentless crowing. That's when you notice the flies. They seem unusually interested in you today. Welcome to the 16th century, where being sick is less a medical condition and more an invitation to a spectacular variety of creative torments. You are not a noble with access to the marginally less incompetent royal physicians. You're not a scholar who might have read Galen or Hippocrates and developed some rudimentary understanding of the human body, albeit one that is spectacularly wrong in almost every particular. No, you are but a humble villager. Perhaps you tend the fields, or apprentice to the Fletcher, or serve in the household of the minor gentry who own these lands. Your medical knowledge extends to recognizing that blood belongs inside your body, a revolutionary concept your local barber surgeon tragically failed to grasp. You attempt to rise from your pallet. A wave of dizziness forces you back down. The small, smoke-filled room you share with your family spins lazily around you. Your younger siblings stare with wide, frightened eyes. They've seen this before. Last winter, it was your cousin. 3 days of sweating and delirium, followed by a hasty burial and the burning of his meager possessions. Your mother approaches cautiously, pressing a rough hand to your forehead. She pulls back with a sharp intake of breath, burning like the devil's.
"Forge," she mutters, crossing herself, and so it begins.
Your journey through the medical marvels of the Renaissance, where the cutting edge of healthcare involves bleeding you until you faint and diagnosing your illness by the taste of your urine. Make yourself comfortable, dear viewer. Unlike the protagonist of our tale, you can at least enjoy the comforts of your temperature-controlled room and memory foam pillow while witnessing the horrors that await. The first day is always the most hopeful. Part 2. Diagnosis. The art of educated guessing. You've been sick for precisely 1 day, and already your family has cycled through an impressive array of diagnoses. Your father believes you've been cursed by old widow Hawthorne, whose cat you accidentally stepped on last market day. Your grandmother is convinced your humours are imbalanced, specifically an excess of black bile which she bases on absolutely nothing except that you look a bit yellowish around the gills. Your little sister thinks you're dying, but she thinks everyone is dying. She's 6 and remarkably astute for her age. By midday, word has spread through your village of 12 hovels and a church that you've taken ill. This summons the closest thing your community has to medical expertise, Agnes, the local wise woman, who has achieved her reputation primarily by not dying yet and knowing which herbs make a passable tea. Agnes shuffles into your home, a bundle of dried plants clutched in her gnarled hands. She smells of wood smoke and something vaguely medicinal. The wrinkles on her face deepen as she examines you from a safe distance. "Show me the tongue," she commands. You oblige, sticking out your tongue like a recalcitrant child. Agnes squints and nods with the confident authority of someone who has absolutely no idea what they're looking at, but must maintain appearances. "Bad humours," she pronounces. "The stars are poorly aligned with your birth sign." Your mother nods solemnly as though Agnes has just shared the wisdom of Solomon himself rather than astrological gibberish. "Mercury is in retrograde," Agnes continues, now grinding something foul-smelling in a small wooden mortar, "and Saturn stands in opposition to your life force." Ah, yes, Saturn, famously invested in your personal well-being despite existing as a giant ball of gas some 746 million miles away. In the 1500s, astronomy and medicine are intimate bedfellows, locked in a passionate embrace of mutual ignorance. Agnes prepares a poultice of herbs and what appears to be fresh cow dung. Modern viewers might recognize this as an excellent way to introduce a variety of exciting new infections to your already compromised system. Your family, however, receives this development with profound relief. "Apply this to the chest and feet,"
Agnes instructs. "It will draw out the evil humours. Of course it will."
because evil humours famously exit through the feet, like tiny demonic housebreakers fleeing through the cellar. But Agnes isn't finished with her medical miracle tour. She produces a small clay flask containing a murky liquid. "Drink this at sunrise."
"And sunset," she says. "It's a tincture of mugwort, dandelion, and a pinch of powdered elk horn." You accept the flask with trembling hands, not yet knowing that this concoction ranks among the more benign treatments you'll encounter. At least,
Mugwort and dandelion possess mild medicinal properties. The elk horn is just expensive nonsense, the 16th century equivalent of a designer label, proving that humanity's ability to profit from suffering is truly timeless. Now, modern viewers might be thinking, surely someone in the 16th century had some legitimate medical knowledge. What about university-trained physicians? Oh, my sweet summer child, let me tell you about the physicians of the 1500s. Part 3, The Learned Physician, Education in Error. 3 days have passed and the cow dung poultice has, shockingly, failed to cure whatever ails you. Your fever now burns with the intensity of 1,000 suns. The racking cough that began yesterday leaves your chest feeling as though it's been stomped on by the blacksmith's apprentice. Your family, increasingly desperate, has scraped together enough money to summon a physician from the nearby town. This requires selling a prized milk cow and promising your youngest brother as an indentured servant to the miller, but desperate times call for desperate measures. The physician arrives in a carriage that immediately identifies him as someone who profits handsomely from human suffering. He wears a long dark robe and a peculiar beaked mask stuffed with herbs, which he believes protects him from miasmas, poisonous vapors that educated men of the time believe cause disease. Spoiler alert, they don't. Germ theory is still 3 centuries away, which means this highly educated man has less understanding of what's making you sick than a moderately attentive elementary school student in the 21st century. The physician enters your home with the cautious demeanor of someone stepping into a cesspool. He isn't wrong to be concerned. Your living conditions would give a modern health inspector an aneurysm, but his caution stems from entirely incorrect assumptions about disease transmission. He carries an impressively bound tome, which he consults with theatrical gravity. The book contains medical knowledge handed down from Galen, a Greek physician who died in 210 CE and performed most of his anatomical studies on pigs and monkeys, then assumed humans were built the same way. Spoiler, we're not. The physician approaches your bedside holding a pomander of aromatic herbs to his nose. He observes you without touching, then requests a sample of your urine. Your mother hurriedly provides this in a clay cup. What follows is a masterclass in medical theatre. The physician holds the urine up to the light, swirls it, sniffs it, thankfully, stopping short of tasting it, though that was a legitimate diagnostic technique of the era. The urine is too yellow, he announces with grave authority. This indicates an excess of yellow bile caused by an overheated liver. He consults his astronomical charts because in the 16th century, your liver function is inexplicably tied to the position of Jupiter. As I suspected, he continues, the patient's birth sign is in conflict with the current celestial alignment. The humors are severely imbalanced. Revolutionary diagnosis, doctor. Absolutely groundbreaking. Definitely worth the cow and your brother's future. The treatment is clear, the physician announces. The patient requires immediate bloodletting to restore balance to the humors. From his bag, the physician produces a terrifying array of blades, cups, and what appears to be a small wooden box. He opens the box to reveal several fat, glistening leeches. Welcome to 16th century healthcare, where the treatment for blood loss is more blood loss. The physician selects a narrow blade and approaches your arm. Your mother and father watch, with hopeful expressions. They've paid handsomely for this treatment after all. It must be effective. The blade presses against the inside of your elbow. You're too weak to protest as it bites into your skin. Blood wells up, surprisingly dark in the dim light of your home. Excellent, the physician murmurs, as though your body is performing a particularly impressive trick. The blood is dark, indicating an abundance of black bile. He collects the blood in a shallow bowl, continuing until you feel lightheaded and your vision begins to dim around the edges. Only then does he press a cloth against the wound. We must continue the treatment. Tomorrow, he announces, 3 more sessions should suffice. 3 more sessions of blood removal because clearly what your weakened, infection-fighting body needs is fewer red blood cells. The physician leaves the leeches as a parting gift, instructing your mother to apply them to your temples and the soles of your feet at midnight. This will draw the fever downward and out of the body, because fevers, like evil humors, prefer to exit through the feet. Medieval medicine really had a foot fetish, didn't it? As the physician departs, your family's cow and brother's future leaving with him, you sink back into your sweat-soaked pallet, significantly weaker than before his visit. Congratulations! You've just experienced premium healthcare, circa 1550. Your condition is now measurably worse, but at least your humors are theoretically more balanced. If only that were the end of your medical adventures. But dear viewer, we're just getting started. Part 4. Home Remedies, Creative Approaches to Suffering. The physician's treatments have left you weaker, paler, and no less feverish than before. Your family, having exhausted their financial resources on bloodletting and leech therapy, must now turn to home remedies passed down through generations. Your grandmother hobbles about the single room of your home, muttering incantations over a bubbling pot. The steam carries an odor so foul it temporarily distracts you from your misery. When modern medical shows depict medieval medicine as herbs and poultices, they're being extraordinarily charitable. What they mean is random plants and animal parts boiled together based on superstition and desperation. This will cure you, your grandmother promises, lifting a ladle of murky brown liquid. My mother made it for the sweating sickness of 1517. You don't have the heart to point out that everyone who drank her mother's remedy in 1517 is now dead. Correlation doesn't imply causation, but in this case, it's certainly suggestive. The brew contains, among other things, dried toad, crushed eggshells, mistletoe gathered during a full moon, a strand of hair from a virgin, your little sister contributed, powdered antler, something unidentifiable that might have once been a rodent. From a modern pharmacological perspective, this concoction has roughly the same medicinal value as drinking puddle water, though with the added excitement of possible poisoning from the toad. Drink, your grandmother commands, holding the cup to your lips. You drink. What choice do you
Have? The taste defies description, though if despair had a flavour, this would be it. Your body immediately attempts to reject this assault on your senses, but your grandmother is prepared.
She pinches your nose until you swallow. Good, she nods approvingly. Now we tie the pigeon. I'm sorry, did she say tie the pigeon? Indeed she did. From a small cage, your grandmother produces a struggling pigeon with practiced movements that suggest this is not her first pigeon-based medical intervention. She binds the confused bird's feet with a length of twine. The pigeon draws the fever into itself, she explains, placing the distressed bird directly on top of your head. There you lie, a sick person with a live pigeon tied to your head, wondering where exactly your life took this peculiar turn. The pigeon, equally confused by this arrangement, occasionally pecks at your scalp or defecates in your hair. This is not a fringe treatment invented for your entertainment, dear viewers. Tying pigeons, chickens, or other small animals to afflicted body parts was a legitimate medical practice in the 16th century. The theory held that the animal would absorb the illness and then die, taking your disease with it to the great beyond. Your mother, meanwhile, has been consulting with the village blacksmith's wife, who has her own approach to healing. We must balance the hot illness with cold remedies, she announces, approaching your palate with a bucket of water so cold it has ice fragments floating in it. Before you can protest, she dumps the entire contents over your fevered body. The shock sends your system into overdrive. You gasp, you flail, you question every life choice that has led to this moment. The pigeon, sharing your distress, flaps frantically atop your head. Now quickly, wrap him in the wool blankets, the blacksmith's wife instructs. We must make him sweat out the illness. Soaking wet and suddenly wrapped in heavy wool blankets, you begin to shiver uncontrollably. The contrast between your fever and the icy water creates a special kind of misery previously unknown to you. It's working, your mother declares optimistically.
As though your violent shivering is a sign of imminent recovery rather than possible hypothermia. The blacksmith's wife nods sagely.
Now for the onions. Of course, the onions. Because what this scenario really needed was onions. She produces several large onions sliced in half. These are placed at strategic points around your body, under your armpits, behind your knees, and at the soles of your feet. Their sharp odor mingles with your fever sweat, the wet wool, and the increasingly distressed pigeon to create an olfactory experience that defies description. The onions draw out the poison, the blacksmith's wife explains. By nightfall you lie in a nest of damp wool, crushed onions and pigeon feathers. The bird has mercifully stopped struggling, though whether it's dead or simply resigned to its fate is unclear. Your fever burns on, unconcerned by these botanical and avian interventions. Now modern viewers might wonder, why didn't people notice these treatments weren't working? The simple answer is confirmation bias, a cognitive shortcut humans have employed consistently throughout history. When someone recovered after having a pigeon tied to their head, the pigeon got the credit. When someone died, despite the pigeon, therapy, other factors were blamed. The treatment started too late, the pigeon wasn't young enough, Mercury was in retrograde, or God simply called another soul home. Medical science lacked the concept of controlled studies. Anecdotal evidence reigned supreme, and humans are remarkably good at seeing patterns where none exist. As you drift between consciousness and increasingly vivid fever dreams, your family continues their medical experimentations with the desperate creativity of people who have no better options. Your mother rubs your chest with goose fat and vinegar. Your father places a hot brick at your feet. Your brother hangs garlic cloves around your neck. Your sister prays. Of these interventions, only your sister's approach is harmless. The rest range from ineffective to actively counterproductive. As dawn breaks on your 5th day of illness, your family faces an uncomfortable truth. The home remedies have failed as spectacularly as the physician's interventions. It's time to seek spiritual assistance, because if medicine can't save you, perhaps God can. Or, failing that, perhaps He can be persuaded to make your suffering slightly more meaningful. Part 5. Spiritual remedies. When medicine fails, try prayer. The village priest arrives shortly after dawn. Father Thomas is a ruddy-faced man whose breath suggests he's been communing with the Holy Spirits, specifically the kind brewed in oak barrels. He carries with him the tools of his trade, a worn Bible, a vial of holy water, and a small silver cross. His expression suggests he's seen this scenario play out many times before, and rarely with a happy ending. How long has the sickness been upon him? He asks your mother, maintaining a prudent distance from your feverish form. 5 days, father, she replies, wringing her hands. We've tried everything. Father Thomas nods gravely. Everything except sufficient prayer, perhaps. The priest opens his Bible to a well-worn page and begins to recite in Latin, a language neither you nor yours
family understands.
For all you know, he could be reading a recipe for bread pudding, but the sonorous tones and ancient words carry an authority that modern medical jargon would envy. As he speaks, he sprinkles holy water across your body. The droplets provide momentary relief from the fever's heat, which is more than can be said for most of the treatments you've endured thus far. The illness has taken strong hold, Father Thomas pronounces. We must consider the possibility that it is not merely a sickness of the body, but of the soul. Ah yes, because tuberculosis, typhoid, and bubonic plague are famously cured by moral improvement. Has your son committed any sins that might have invited this affliction? The priest asks your parents. Your mother hesitates. Your father clears his throat. He did steal an apple from Goodman Fletcher's orchard last autumn, your father admits. And he's been known to sleep through Sunday prayers, your mother adds. Father Thomas nods as though these minor transgressions fully explain your current state. The Lord's punishments are just, but His mercy is boundless. Translation. You might die from this mundane illness because you napped through church, but if you repent sincerely enough, God might reconsider. The priest leads your family in prayer, their voices forming a chorus of desperate hope. You attempt to join in, but your parched throat produces only a weak croak. After the prayers, Father Thomas approaches your bedside with renewed purpose. We must drive out any evil spirits that may have taken residence, he announces. From his satchel he produces a small flask of oil. This he applies to your forehead, lips, hands and feet, while murmuring additional Latin phrases. The oil has a sharp, herbal scent that cuts through the miasma of sickness permeating your home. It's not unpleasant, which makes it a notable improvement over most of your recent experiences. Now, Father Thomas says, his expression grave, we must determine whether demons are involved, because it's never just an infection, is it? It's always got to be demons. Apparently, microorganisms aren't dramatic enough for the 16th century. The test for demonic possession is both simple and terrible. Father Thomas produces a small vial of what he claims is the blessed blood of Saint Whoever, though it looks suspiciously like wine. This he attempts to pour into your mouth. If you swallow it without incident, you're merely sick. If you cough, sputter, or vomit, all likely reactions for someone with a high fever and irritated throat, clearly demons are afoot. You
Cough. Of course you cough. The liquid burns your raw throat like fire. Father Thomas steps back, making the sign of the cross.
As I feared, he intones, the evil one has a foothold here. Your mother begins to weep. Your father's face darkens. Having a child with an illness was bad enough. Having a child with demons is a social catastrophe. The priest begins to prepare for a minor exorcism, rearranging furniture and instructing your family to bring clean water and more candles. Your home is rapidly transforming into a theatre of spiritual warfare, with you as the unwilling centerpiece. It's worth noting, dear viewers, that the line between medicine and religion was vanishingly thin in the 16th century. Illness was often seen as divine punishment or demonic influence. Treatments blended physical and spiritual elements without distinction. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a coherent worldview based on the best understanding available at the time. The germ theory of disease was centuries away. Microscopes existed but were primitive. The concept of viruses was unimaginable. In this world, the idea that invisible demons caused illness made as much sense as invisible microbes. More sense, perhaps, given the religious framework that structured all knowledge. The exorcism proceeds with all the drama you might expect. Father Thomas commands the demons to depart in increasingly forceful Latin. Your family joins in with enthusiastic amens whenever there's a pause. You alternate between confused compliance and fever-induced delirium. At one point you babble nonsensically, which only confirms the priest's diagnosis of demonic influence. The ritual continues for hours. By the time Father Thomas declares it complete, the sun is setting and everyone is exhausted, none more. So than you, who have endured a full day of spiritual assault on top of your physical illness. The demons have been weakened, the priest announces, wiping sweat from his brow. But the battle for this soul continues. Translation, you're still sick, so we'll need another performance tomorrow. Tuesdays are 2 for 1 on exorcisms. Father Thomas leaves with instructions for continued prayer and a suggestion that your family might consider a donation to the church to ensure extra divine attention. Even in matters of life and death, the collection plate must be filled. As darkness falls, you lie in your pallet physically and spiritually depleted. The day's events have left you no healthier, but considerably more confused about the metaphysical nature of your illness. Your mother sits beside you, her expression torn between maternal concern and religious fear. She gently wipes your brow with a damp cloth, perhaps the only genuinely helpful treatment you've received thus far. Sleep now, she whispers. God and his angels watch over you. You close your eyes, too exhausted to do otherwise, and you dream of a world where illness is met with science rather than superstition. A world where fever is treated with medication rather than moral judgment. A world about 5 centuries away. Part 6. The Barber Surgeon. When cutting is caring. Dawn breaks on the 6th day of your illness. The fever remains, though it now ebbs and flows like a tide. Sometimes you're lucid enough to recognize your family and remember what year it is. Other times you drift in a haze where past, present, and impossible futures blend seamlessly together. Your family has exhausted their repertoire of home remedies. The priest's exorcism has failed to evict your supposed demons. The physician's bloodletting has weakened but not cured you. It's time for the nuclear option of 16th century medicine. The barber surgeon. Barber surgeons occupy a curious middle ground in the medical hierarchy of Renaissance Europe. Less educated than physicians, more hands-on than priests, they represent a pragmatic approach to healthcare. They cut hair, pull teeth, lance boils, set bones, and amputate limbs, often with the same tools, minimally cleaned between procedures. That red and white striped pole outside modern barbershops? It represents bloodied bandages wrapped around a staff. Just a little historical tidbit to make your next haircut more interesting. The barber surgeon who answers your family's summons is named Master Gregory. He arrives smelling strongly of alcohol, both the kind used for cleaning wounds and the kind used for personal consumption. The distinction is academic, as both serve to steady his hands for the delicate work ahead. Master Gregory's toolkit would give a modern surgeon nightmares. It contains several razors of varying sizes, a selection of saws, pliers for tooth extraction, needles and catgut for suturing, a small hammer and chisel, various probes and hooks whose purposes defy polite description. Unlike the physician, who approached your illness with theoretical pontification, Master Gregory is a man of action. He examines you with calloused hands that have seen more of human anatomy than any medical textbook of the era. "Fever's high," he grunts. "Breathing's wet. Pain here." He presses on your chest, eliciting a weak moan. "Thought so." Master Gregory turns to your parents, his expression grave but practical. "Could be the lung sickness," he suggests. "Could be bad humours settled in the chest. Either way, we need to release the pressure." Release the pressure? That doesn't sound ominous at all. From his bag, Master Gregory produces a small metal cup and a candle. This, you learn with mounting horror, is a cupping device. The technique involves creating a vacuum by burning away the oxygen inside the cup, then placing it on the skin. The vacuum pulls the flesh upward, supposedly drawing disease toward the surface. The barber surgeon lights the candle and heats the interior of the cup. In one swift motion, he extinguishes the flame and presses the cup against your chest. The sensation is indescribable, a forceful pulling that feels as though your skin might separate from your body. Master Gregory places 6 cups across your chest and back, creating a constellation of small torture devices. "Leave them until they fall off," he instructs your mother. "The longer they draw, the better, but the cupping is merely a prelude. Master Gregory's main event requires sharper implements. The illness has settled too deep," he explains, selecting a slender blade. "We must create a pathway for its escape." Because illnesses famously prefer designated exits, like tiny disease gentlemen, they'll always use the door if one is provided. With the casual confidence of a man who has caused incalculable suffering in the name of healing, Master Gregory makes several small incisions between your ribs. The pain is sharp but brief, soon replaced by the alarming sensation of warm blood trickling down your side. "Good flow." The barber surgeon nods approvingly. "Dark blood means bad humours, or, as modern medicine might suggest, venous rather than arterial blood. But such distinctions are centuries away. Now for the drawing plaster," Master Gregory continues, producing a small pot containing a greyish paste. This concoction, a blend of mustard, vinegar, and other irritants, is spread over the incisions. The burning sensation is immediate and intense, as though someone is applying fire directly to your open wounds, which, chemically speaking, is not far from the truth. The burn means it's working, Master Gregory assures your whimpering form. It draws the poison out. Your mother watches with the desperate hope of someone who has invested their last resources in this treatment. Your father has stepped outside,
unable to witness your suffering. Master Gregory packs his bloodied tools with the casual air of a carpenter putting away his hammer.
Change the plaster when it dries, he instructs. Keep the windows closed. Night air carries miasmas. This last bit of advice ensures you'll recover in a sealed room filled with the aromas of blood, mustard plaster, unwashed bodies, and disease. From a modern perspective, it's difficult to imagine a more perfect environment for bacteria to flourish. Your father returns to pay the barber surgeon. The fee is steep, a month's earnings for an hour's work, but what price can you put on a loved one's health? Besides, Master Gregory is considerate enough to offer a discount on future services should the current treatment prove insufficient. If the fever hasn't broken by tomorrow, he says from the doorway, we may need to consider trepanation. Trepanation? For those unfamiliar with this charming medical procedure, it involves drilling a hole in the skull to release evil spirits. Because nothing says healing like creating an opening directly into your brain cavity in an era before antibiotics or sterilization. As Master Gregory departs, you lie in a state of unique misery. 6 cups pull painfully at your flesh. Your side burns with the mustard plaster. Your head throbs. Your lungs struggle for air in the sealed, fetid room. And yet here's the truly horrifying part. By 16th century standards, you've received excellent care. Between the physician's bloodletting, the priest's exorcism, and the barber surgeon's cutting and cupping, you've experienced the full spectrum of available medical interventions. Night falls. The cups eventually release their vacuum grip and fall away, leaving perfect circular bruises that will linger for weeks, should you live so long. The mustard plaster dries and cracks, pulling at the incisions beneath. Your mother changes the plaster as instructed, each touch sending fresh waves of agony through your body. Your siblings watch from the corner, their eyes wide with fear and fascination. This educational experience may serve them well in the future, or feature prominently in their nightmares. Possibly both, as you drift between consciousness and delirium. One thought forms with perfect clarity. If you survive this illness, it will be in spite of your treatment, not because of it. Part 7. Quarantine. When society decides you're better off elsewhere. Dawn breaks on the 7th day of your illness. In biblical terms, this should be a day of rest and completion. Instead, it brings new complications. Your cough has worsened overnight. Each breath rattles in your chest like pebbles in a tin cup. More alarmingly, small red spots have appeared on your arms and neck, tiny harbingers of dread in a century intimately familiar with plague. Your mother notices the spots first. Her sharp intake of breath alerts your father, who approaches with uncharacteristic caution. He examines the spots, without touching them, his face paling beneath its weather-beaten tan. "I'll fetch Father Thomas," he says, already moving toward the door. But your father doesn't go directly to the church. First, he stops at the village headman's house, where a hasty council convenes. The word plague isn't spoken aloud. Doing so might summon the very thing they fear, but it hangs unspoken in the air between them. The village council arrives at your home like an execution party. 6 men, including Father Thomas, the headman, and the miller. They maintain a prudent distance from your pallet, conferring in low voices with your increasingly distressed parents. The marks are suspicious, the headman says. his voice carrying the weight of communal authority. "We cannot risk the whole village." Your mother begins to weep. Your father's hands clench into helpless fists. "It might not be the plague," he argues, though without conviction. "The barber surgeon said lung sickness." The headman shakes his head. "We cannot take that chance. Not after what happened in 39. What happened in 1539, dear viewers, was an outbreak of bubonic plague that decimated this region. 1 in 3 villagers perished, their bodies stacked like cordwood in mass graves blessed in haste by an overwhelmed priest. The survivors don't speak of it directly, but its shadow lingers in empty cottages and orphan children. Father Thomas steps forward, his expression somber but kind. "It is for the good of all," he says gently, "even the afflicted. And so your fate is decided. You are to be removed from your home and placed in quarantine until your illness reveals itself definitively, either through recovery or through symptoms too terrible to ignore." Quarantine in the 16th century takes various forms, none of them pleasant. For the wealthy, it might mean isolation in a private chamber, with servants bringing food and water. For the middling sort, perhaps confinement in an outbuilding or barn. For a humble villager like yourself, it means the plague house on the outskirts. Of many European villages stood simple structures, often little more than shacks, designated for the isolation of suspected plague victims. Some were built specifically for this purpose after previous outbreaks. Others were the abandoned homes of entire families claimed by disease, considered too tainted for new occupants, but too valuable to burn. Your father and the miller wrap you in a blanket and carry you to a waiting cart. Your protests are feeble, your resistance non-existent. The fever has sapped your strength, leaving you as helpless as an infant. Your mother presses a small bundle into your hands, a few crusts of bread, an onion, a small flask of water, provisions for your exile. "Pray," she whispers, tears streaming down her face. "God has not forsaken you." An optimistic assessment, given the circumstances. The journey to the plague house takes less than 10 minutes, though it might as well be a voyage to the moon for all the chance you have of returning. The small structure comes into view, a sagging cottage with boarded windows and a door marked with a crude X. The miller and your father hesitate at the threshold, neither willing to enter the miasma of disease they believe permeates the building. "Can you walk?" your father asks, his voice thick with emotion. You manage a weak nod. With their support, you stagger through the doorway into your new accommodation. The interior of the plague house defies your worst expectations. The single room contains a straw pallet, dark with suspicious stains, a cracked chamber pot, a small table bearing a stub of candle, and, most alarmingly, a desiccated corpse in the corner. Yes, a corpse. Apparently, the last occupant of this charming establishment failed to recover and, more problematically, failed to receive a proper burial. Whether this oversight was due to fear of contagion or simple neglect is unclear, but the result is undeniable. You now have a roommate who has advanced significantly further in the dying process than yourself. Your father and the miller back away hastily, crossing themselves. The door closes with a thud that sounds uncomfortably final. "We'll bring food," your father calls through the door. "Daily. And Father Thomas will pray for you." Small comforts under the circumstances. Alone, save for your decomposing companion, you survey your surroundings with growing despair. The plague house represents society's best attempt at disease control, complete isolation, no treatment, no comfort, no company except the dead. You sink onto the stained pallet, too exhausted to
remain standing.
The spotted rash on your arms seems to have spread slightly, though in the dim light it's difficult to be certain. Quarantine is perhaps the oldest and most effective public health measure in human history. Long before germ theory, people observed that separating the sick from the healthy reduced disease transmission. The practice takes its name from the Italian 40 giorni, 40 days, the length of time ships were required to remain isolated in Venetian ports during plague outbreaks. The concept was sound. The implementation, however, often amounted to a death sentence. Without proper care, nutrition, or hygiene, quarantined individuals frequently succumbed to their original illness or acquired new ones in their compromised state. As night falls, the temperature in the plague house drops precipitously. Your fever alternates between burning heat and bone-deep chills. The single blanket provides inadequate protection against the cold, and the candle stub burns out within an hour, leaving you in complete darkness. The only sound is your own labored breathing, and occasionally, when the wind shifts, the creaking of your deceased roommate's leathery remains. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, interrupted by coughing fits and fever dreams. In these dreams, your desiccated companion speaks to you, offering medical advice that sounds suspiciously like modern antibiotics and antipyretics. You need amoxicillin, the corpse suggests helpfully, and perhaps some ibuprofen for the fever. Your subconscious is cruelly optimistic. Dawn arrives with a thin grey light filtering through the cracks in the boarded windows. You've survived your first night in quarantine, a minor victory, but one worth acknowledging. Your condition seems unchanged, neither better nor worse. The spots remain, but haven't multiplied significantly. Your chest still burns with each breath, but you continue to draw those breaths, which counts as success by 16th century standards. True to his word, your father approaches the plague house at first light. He doesn't enter, the barrier between the sick and healthy remains inviolable, but leaves a small bundle just outside the door. "Are you alive?" he calls through the wooden planks. "Yes," you manage to croak. "Thanks be to God," your father replies, relief evident in his voice. "We're praying for you, everyone in the village." Everyone except the village council, perhaps, who might privately be praying for a different outcome, one that confirms their caution was justified. When your father's footsteps fade, you gather your strength to retrieve the bundle. It contains a small loaf of dark bread, a hunk of hard cheese, a flask of weak ale, a small pouch of dried herbs with instructions to make a tea. The food represents a significant portion of your family's daily sustenance, a sacrifice that doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. You eat sparingly, aware that future deliveries depend on your father's continued health and the village's tolerance. The herbs you recognize as your grandmother's blend, the same concoction that failed to cure you at home but might at least provide psychological comfort. The day passes with excruciating slowness, with no books, no conversation, and no tasks. To perform, you're left alone with your thoughts and symptoms. The isolation proves nearly as debilitating as the illness itself. By midday, you've named your deceased companion Geoffrey and have begun conducting one-sided conversations about your symptoms. "The fever seems a bit lower today, wouldn't you say, Geoffrey?" Geoffrey, unsurprisingly, maintains a stoic silence. Modern medical research confirms what you're experiencing. The psychological impacts of isolation can be as devastating as physical illness. Your 16th century mind doesn't have the vocabulary to describe concepts like depression or anxiety, but you feel their effects nonetheless. As the second day of quarantine bleeds into the third, then the fourth, a routine of sorts establishes
itself. Your father brings provisions at dawn. You consume them slowly throughout the day. You talk to Jeffrey.
You sleep when fever and coughing allow. Your symptoms fluctuate but generally trend toward improvement. The rash fades, the fever breaks occasionally, allowing periods of lucidity. Your cough remains but becomes more productive, a good sign, though one that Jeffrey probably doesn't appreciate. On the 5th day of quarantine, the 12th day of your illness, Father Thomas accompanies your father to the plague house. "The spots," he calls through the door. "Have they spread?" "No," you reply truthfully. "They're fading."
A murmured consultation follows, too quiet for you to hear clearly. 3 more days, Father Thomas finally announces. If no new symptoms appear, you may return home. 3 more days with Jeffrey. You've developed a certain fondness for your
Silent roommate, though the relationship remains decidedly one-sided. The waiting period passes without incident. Your recovery continues slowly but steadily. By the final day, you're strong enough to stand without support and can breathe without constant pain. When the door finally opens, the sunlight nearly blinds you. 17 days since your first symptoms appeared. 8 days in the plague house. An eternity by any measure. Your father and brother support you as you walk home on unsteady legs. The villagers watch from a distance, their expressions a mixture of relief and lingering suspicion. You've returned from the borderlands between life and death, a journey that leaves its mark in ways both visible and invisible. Your ordeal isn't quite over. A period of convalescence awaits, weeks of rebuilding strength sapped by fever and inadequate nutrition. But the acute crisis has passed. You've survived an illness that might easily have claimed your life, and you've done so despite the best efforts of 16th century medical practitioners. Sometimes the body heals itself, if only we give it the chance. As for Jeffrey, well, proper burial arrangements are finally made. You find yourself unexpectedly emotional as your former roommate is carried to consecrated ground. In your fever-addled isolation, that silent presence became something approaching companionship. Party 8. Convalescence, the long road back. Surviving a serious illness in the 16th century is only the first step. Recovery presents its own unique challenges. Your return home is marked by both joy and practical difficulties. Your muscles, wasted by fever and inactivity, struggle to perform even basic tasks. Walking across the room leaves you breathless. Lifting a water bucket is unthinkable. Modern medicine recognizes the importance of physical therapy and proper nutrition in recovery. Renaissance medicine, not so much. Your mother hovers anxiously, convinced that any exertion might trigger a relapse. Your father watches with poorly concealed concern as you struggle to hold a spoon without trembling. Your siblings treat you with a mixture of fascination and wariness, as though your brush with death might somehow be contagious. Rest, your mother urges, retrieving the fallen utensil. You must rebuild your strength. Sound advice, though her conception of how one rebuilds strength differs markedly from modern understanding. In the 16th century, convalescence often involves consuming strengthening foods like organ meats and bone broths, avoiding cold foods that might disturb your humors, restricting movement to prevent taxing your vital spirit, wearing protective amulets to ward off disease recurrence, gradually reintegrating into society as your miasma dissipates. Some of these approaches are accidentally beneficial. Bone broth does provide easily digested protein and minerals. Rest is indeed important for recovery. Others are actively counterproductive. The restriction of movement delays the rebuilding of muscle strength. The focus on hot foods often results in a diet lacking vital nutrients. Your grandmother prepares special restorative tonics, concoctions of herbs, honey, and occasionally raw eggs that challenge both your gag reflex and your diplomatic skills. "Drink," she insists, hovering until you've drained the cup. It will restore your vital essence. Your vital essence remains unconvinced, but you comply. After facing death, choking down a questionable herbal smoothie seems a minor inconvenience. Recovery from serious illness in the 16th century could take months rather than weeks. Without antibiotics to clear lingering infections, without proper understanding of nutrition, without physical therapy to rebuild muscle, the body was largely left to heal itself through trial and error. Many never fully recovered, carrying permanent disabilities or weakened constitutions for the remainder
of their lives.
A serious illness often marked a dividing line, life before and life after, with the latter notably diminished. As days pass, your strength gradually returns, a testament more to your youth and natural resilience than to your grandmother's tonics. You begin assisting with light household tasks, then graduating to more demanding chores. Each milestone, carrying your own water, walking to the village well, resuming your normal workload, represents a victory over death that your 16th century mind attributes to divine intervention rather than immunological processes. But physical recovery is only part of the journey. Your illness and quarantine have altered your standing in the community in subtle but significant ways. Some villagers avoid you, crossing to the other side of the muddy lane when you approach. Others watch you with morbid curiosity, as though expecting you to collapse at any moment or reveal secret wisdom gained from your proximity to death. Children are simultaneously warned away from you and dared to touch you on a dare. Touch the
"Plague boy," they whisper to each other, giggling nervously. "I dare you." The village wise woman stops you outside the church after Sunday service.
"You've been marked," she murmurs, her rheumy eyes searching your face. Death touched you but didn't take you. That means something. In the 16th century, surviving a serious illness carries mystical connotations. You've walked in death's shadow and returned, a journey that sets you apart from your peers. Some believe this grants you special protection. Having faced one deadly illness, you might be spared from others. Others suspect the opposite, that your brush with mortality has weakened your spiritual defenses, making you vulnerable to future afflictions. Much like modern social media health advice, these theories manage to be simultaneously contradictory and delivered with absolute confidence. As weeks pass, the novelty of your survival fades. The village finds new dramas to occupy its collective attention: a disputed boundary stone, a cow producing milk with a faintly blue tinge, the miller's daughter caught behind the granary with the blacksmith's son. Life continues its relentless cycle of planting and harvesting, births and deaths, feasts and famines. Your illness becomes another story to tell around winter fires, another entry in the village's unwritten chronicle. But you are changed, not merely by the physical ordeal, but by the knowledge it imparted. You've glimpsed the fragility of human existence and the limitations of human knowledge. You've experienced the best and worst of 16th century healthcare and somehow emerged on the other side. The next time fever strikes the village, you watch, with newly critical eyes as the familiar rituals unfold, the bloodletting, the herbal concoctions, the prayers and amulets. You say nothing. Challenging established wisdom is rarely welcomed in any century, but you wonder, and sometimes when no one is watching, you experiment with your own approaches to minor ailments. Clean water rather than wine for washing wounds, rest and fluids for minor fevers rather than purging and bleeding, small heresies against medical orthodoxy, based not on book learning but on lived experience. In this quiet resistance, dear viewer, lies the seed of empirical medicine, though it will take centuries to flower fully. Part 9. The psychological aftermath. Scars you can't see. Recovery continues in fits and starts. Your body gradually rebuilds its strength, but your mind processes the experience in ways your 16th century vocabulary struggles to articulate. You wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced the spots have returned. Your trembling hands examine your arms in the faint moonlight filtering through the shutters. Nothing. Just a dream, the same dream that has haunted your sleep since your return from the plague house. Post-traumatic stress is not a modern invention, though the terminology to describe it is, throughout history, those who survived life-threatening experiences, whether battles, natural disasters, or serious illnesses, carried psychological scars alongside their physical ones. In the 16th century, such nightmares and anxieties would be attributed to spiritual causes rather than psychological ones, perhaps demons lingering from your illness, perhaps divine warnings to maintain a virtuous life after being spared. Your mother notices your restless sleep, the way you flinch at certain sounds, the sudden moments of distant staring. She interprets these symptoms through the only framework available to her. "We should have Father Thomas bless you again," she suggests one morning, watching as you stare blankly into the cooking fire. "To ensure all evil influences are truly gone." You nod absently, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. How can you explain that what haunts you isn't supernatural, but entirely human? The memory of helplessness, the knowledge of how quickly community support can transform into exile, the visceral recall of pain that served no purpose beyond satisfying medical theories based on fundamental misunderstandings. Father Thomas performs another blessing, sprinkling holy water and reciting Latin phrases. You participate dutifully, finding comfort not in the ritual itself but in your mother's relief as she watches. Sometimes we heal others by allowing ourselves to be healed in the ways they understand. The psychological impact of serious illness transcends historical periods. The fundamental human experiences, fear, isolation, uncertainty, pain, remain consistent across centuries. What changes are the frameworks we use to interpret and process these experiences? Summer fades into autumn. The harvest occupies everyone's attention, providing blessed distraction from darker thoughts. Physical labor leaves little energy for rumination. By the time the first frost silvers the fields, your body has largely recovered its former strength, though your endurance remains somewhat diminished. Your father notices your thoughtful silences, the new habit you've developed of questioning, rather than accepting. One evening, as you help him repair a broken wagon wheel, he pauses in his work. "It changed you," he observes, his weathered hands resting on the wooden rim. "The sickness." "Yes," you acknowledge, unsure how to elaborate. He nods, returning to his task. "Brush with death does that. Happened to me after the fever of 29, makes a man think differently." This small moment of connection across the generational divide brings unexpected comfort. Your experience, though unique to you, follows patterns as old as humanity itself. Perhaps this is the most universal aspect of serious illness throughout history, the way it transforms our relationship with mortality, making abstract concepts concrete. Death becomes not a distant prospect, but a neighbor you've met whose face you now recognize in a crowd. As winter settles over the village, you find yourself drawn to the healer's hut more frequently, not as a patient, but as an observer. Agnes notices your interest with a mixture of suspicion and gratification. "You want to learn the healing arts?" she asks one day, as you watch her prepare a poultice for the carpenter's infected hand. You hesitate, uncertain yourself what draws you to this space. I want to understand, you finally answer. Agnes studies you with ancient eyes. Understanding is rare, she says. Most want cures without questions. She gestures toward her workbench, where herbs dry in careful bundles. Watch then. Learn what works and what doesn't. This apprenticeship of sorts continues through the winter months. You observe Agnes's treatments, noting which seem to help and which seem to harm. You begin to recognize patterns. Wounds heal better when cleaned with boiled water than with wine. Certain herbs reduce fever more effectively than others. Rest and nourishment accomplish more than dramatic interventions. Agnes herself represents a curious blend of superstition and practical knowledge. For every useless astrological calculation, she possesses a genuinely effective herbal remedy passed down through generations of trial and error. This for pain, she says, showing you a tincture of willow bark containing what modern science would later isolate as salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin. This for sleep, she continues, indicating valerian root. In this quiet exchange of knowledge, we glimpse how medical understanding actually evolved, not in dramatic leaps, but in careful observation, passed from one generation to the next, gradually separating what works from what merely sounds good in theory. Spring arrives, with its annual complement of new illnesses. A coughing sickness spreads through the village, sparing neither young nor old. When your youngest sister succumbs, feverish and struggling for breath, your mother turns not to the physician or priest, but to you. What should we do? She asks, her expression torn between traditional deference to authority and the practical evidence of your recovery. You hesitate only briefly. Keep her warm but not overheated, you advise. Give her the willow bark tea for the fever, honey and thyme for the cough. No bloodletting. This last directive, a direct contradiction of established medical practice, causes your father to look up sharply. The physician would bleed her, he protests. And she would be weaker for it, you counter, with the quiet certainty of personal experience. A tense moment passes between you, a microcosm of the larger conflict between traditional authority and empirical observation that will eventually transform medical practice. Your father finally nods. We'll try it your way, for now. Your sister recovers within days, avoiding the prolonged suffering that often accompanied even minor illnesses in this era. Word spreads. Other families begin seeking your advice, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence as your simple, observation-based approaches demonstrate results. Agnes watches these developments with knowing eyes. You've found your path, she observes one evening, as you help her organize her herb stores. Death marked you, but not as the village thought. It made you a healer. And here we find a pattern repeated throughout medical history. Significant advances often come from those who've experienced illness firsthand, whose personal suffering transformed into motivation to improve care for others. From Edward Jenner's smallpox vaccine to Elizabeth Blackwell becoming the first woman physician. In America, after watching a friend die, the intimate knowledge of illness frequently catalyzes medical progress. Part 10. Reflections from the Present. And so we leave you there, dear viewer, standing at the threshold of a new identity forged in the crucible of suffering and recovery. Your 16th century self will continue to learn, to observe, to question. You'll face resistance from established authorities and gratitude from those you help. You'll get some things wrong and others surprisingly right. Most importantly, you'll contribute one small thread to the vast tapestry of medical evolution that stretches from ancient healing rituals to modern hospital wards. As we return to our comfortable 21st century existence, It's worth reflecting on what this journey through Renaissance medicine reveals about our relationship with illness and healthcare. The fundamental human experiences remain consistent across centuries: the vulnerability of sickness, the desperation for relief, the fear of death, the hope for recovery. What's changed dramatically are the frameworks we use to understand and address these experiences. Where your 16th century counterpart saw imbalanced humours, we see viral loads and bacterial infections. Where they applied bloodletting and exorcism, we administer antibiotics and antivirals. Where they attributed recovery to divine intervention or stellar alignments, we understand immune responses and pharmacological mechanisms. The technology and knowledge have advanced immeasurably, but the human beings experiencing illness remain recognizably the same. That's not to suggest we've reached the pinnacle of medical understanding. 500 years from now, our descendants may look back on chemotherapy or organ transplantation with the same mixture of horror and fascination with which we view bloodletting and trepanation. They deliberately poisoned patients to kill cancer
cells, they might marvel. And they transplanted organs from one body to another using crude surgical techniques requiring lifelong immunosuppression.
Medical progress is rarely linear and never complete. Like and subscribe if you've gained a new appreciation for modern healthcare, imperfect though it may be. What lessons might we take from our temporary residence in the 16th century? First, perhaps, is gratitude. For antibiotics that target specific infections rather than random bloodletting that weakens the entire body. For pain management that actually manages pain. For diagnostic tools that can see inside the body without cutting it open first. Second is humility. Many 16th century physicians were intelligent, educated individuals working diligently within the knowledge frameworks available to them. Their failures weren't primarily moral, but epistemological. They lacked the tools and concepts necessary to understand what they were observing. Our current medical certainties may appear equally limited to future generations. Third is perspective. When we complain about waiting room times or insurance paperwork, legitimate frustrations though they are, we're experiencing inconveniences that would seem miraculous to our historical counterparts. You mean the physician actually cured your infection, and your biggest complaint is that you had to wait 2 hours to see them? And finally, perhaps, is wonder at the remarkable journey of medical science itself, from humoral theory to genomic medicine, from miasmas to microbiomes, from
bloodletting to bypass surgery.
This evolution represents one of humanity's greatest collective achievements, the ongoing effort to understand and heal our own bodies. As you drift towards sleep, comfortable in your clean bed, with antibiotics in your medicine cabinet, and emergency services a phone call away, spare a thought for your 16th century counterpart. They face the same fundamental human vulnerabilities you do, but without the protective infrastructure of modern medicine to buffer them from nature's harsher realities. Their resilience, their courage, their determination to survive against formidable odds. These are qualities worth remembering and honoring across the centuries that separate their experience from our own. Sweet dreams, dear viewer. May your health be good, your doctors competent, and your medical theories based on something more substantial than the position of Jupiter. And if you do wake up with a cough tomorrow, perhaps take a moment to appreciate the fact that no one's suggesting tying a pigeon to your head. Like, subscribe, and remember, the next time you're tempted to complain about modern medicine, consider the alternatives history so generously provided.